Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's lesson. My name is Wes. This is Interactive English, and if it's your first time here watching a video lesson on our channel, it's just about helping you practice and improve your English in a variety of different ways. We have so many different video lessons out there for you to choose from if you're looking for something specific. But today I want to do a Q&A. From time to time, I like to do these lessons and take questions from all of you directly, and I really want to focus on vocabulary this week. I did want to start out because I told people in our members that if they had any questions, I would take some of those first. So I do have our vocabulary document as we put together some words, and then I'll put all of these meanings down in the description below, so in case you want to review. I've also have some of the websites open. Cambridge is the online dictionary that I like to use. It's my favorite one, and I think it's easier to understand the meanings of some of these words. So I started out by asking some of our members if they had any questions related to vocabulary. I don't know, maybe people didn't see it. I know there's some members here in the chat today, and I will take your questions. But I didn't get any comments from people from the YouTube members, but I did from on Patreon. And when I posted this on Patreon, I had a couple of different questions. The first one is talking about who and whom affect, as well as be-all and end-all. So I want to look at all of those right now, and let's go over to our vocabulary list. So the first one, they were asking about who versus whom. Now, who versus whom, who is really, they're both pronouns, but who is talking about the subject, all right? It's going to be a subject pronoun, and you could say, who wants to learn English, like as a question. Whom is really referring more to the object. So, for example, if I said the letter, something like this, the letter is addressed to him. All right. If I want to turn that into a question, because him is the object of a sentence, that is when you might hear somebody would say, to whom is the letter addressed? All right. That is when you would use whom when you're referring to a pronoun that would be the object of the sentence. There's another common phrase that I think many people will use with whom is with the letter to whom it may concern. And you would write this in more of kind of like a business setting, well, not a smiley face, to whom it may concern. So who, you really think about more the subject of the sentence, whom is referring to the object. I think most of the time people are going to use who because they're going to be talking about the subject of the sentence. The next question was about affect versus effect. The pronunciation is pretty much the same, but affect is really the verb, and it's more talking about like the cause of something. So I could say, for example, the weather affected our plans this weekend. All right, the weather affected our plans this weekend. Effect, like something that there is an effect, it's more referring about to the result. All right, so I could say if something would cause, maybe it had a bad effect. Maybe I could say the food had a bad effect on my stomach. Okay? That the result was bad, and effect, again, I think the real difference is this is a noun. So affect with an A is a verb, effect with an E is the noun. And the last question that Aiden had, which was the be-all and end-all. be all end all. This is more of an idiom, and you would say that something is the be all end all of something else. And what it means is, like, if something is the be all end all, it is referring to the most important thing. And often you may hear people use it when saying, like, something is not the most important, and they say it's not the be all end all. So for example, I could say grammar is not the be all and end all of learning English. There are many different there are many things that are important when it comes to learning English, and I can say, well, grammar is not the be all and end all of learning English. It's not the most important thing. It is an important thing, but it's not the be all end all. And I think when she also asked about the pronunciation, I think in this case it is be all and end all, but people would really pronounce and more just like n. Be all and end all. Be all and end all. Sometimes I think that and might even just get dropped, the be all end all. But be all and end all is something that is the most important thing. All right, so those are a couple of questions that, let me move this down in case you guys didn't see it, that wanted to take from our members. So again, I'll answer some more questions for you guys in the chat. So let me know if you guys have any vocabulary questions, and I will try to answer as many as I can. I know the microphone is echoing a little bit. Try to fix that. I'm gonna have to keep working at it, but right now we're gonna push through. We're gonna push through with this Q&A. So Lolly was asking, please, I am good or I am well. I think you could use either one interchangeably. If you're asking how somebody's doing, I think overwhelmingly people would probably use good and just say, yeah, I'm good. How are you doing? I'm good. I think people, when they're saying well, I think they might use it more with doing, like, yeah, I'm doing well. So, like, how are you doing? I'm good, or I'm doing well. Either one, I think, is fine, but those are two, I think, common responses if you want to use, you could use either one. I'm good, I'm doing well. But I think that most people would use good. So let's see. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions? I've been going back and looking through. And yes, I know probably this echo may be affecting the quality of the lesson with the A. So let's see. Abdurrahman asked, what is the meaning of vibe? So let's go over here. That's a good word. To vibe would be used as a verb, and I would think you're often going to follow it with, to vibe with someone. And what it means, if you're vibing, it means that you are kind of getting along or connecting really well. You're getting along or connecting really well, and you are vibing with that person. So I think that's how people might use it, and that's more of an informal use of that. Let's see. Differences between must and have to. Well, both of them are modals of obligation, so in that case, you could really use them interchangeably. I feel like must is probably a little stronger than have to, but really they really mean the same thing. If I say, I have to go to the doctor and I must go to the doctor, it means the same thing, but I said, like, must, I feel like, is a little more, it's stronger. It makes me think that, okay, whatever it is important and they really must go soon. So in that case, let's see, must versus have to. So I'd say that must is stronger. I have to go to the doctor. Just, something that should be done soon. And I must go to the doctor maybe is more immediate, is what I would say. But again, you could use them interchangeably if there's a problem and you say, wow, I have to go to the doctor. But both are modals of obligation. Let's see. Good vibes, yes. So you could say that too. People would send out like good vibes. In that case, vibes is referring to energy. So I wrote out to vibe with someone more as a verb, but if you're sending out good vibes as like a noun, it refers to like energy, like sending out positive energy, good vibes. I like that. Good one, Sleepwalker. Let's see, what else do we got? Circuitous. Alde means, I did a lesson before talking about circuitous. Let me see, can you guys see some of this? So if something is circuitous, it's an adjective. Circuitous is, sorry, let me fix this. Circuitous is an adjective, and it's talking about a long and windy way to get somewhere, or I'd say achieve some aim, all right? So it's usually, I would add something that's kind of maybe unnecessary. So for example, if you are traveling somewhere and you don't take the direct way, you may go more, maybe it's more beautiful, it's more scenic. You could say that, yeah, we took a circuitous way to get here. Or perhaps sometimes I would use it if people get lost. If I get lost and then you're driving all around, once I get there, I'd say, yeah, we took a kind of a circuitous way to get to this location. Or again, if you're talking about achieving some goal, sometimes we don't always do things in order, but the direction you take takes you out of the way, and you could say it was a circuitous. Let's see. What else do we have? I had to, I was having to. So in that case, well, again, that's more like a little bit more of a grammar. So if you had to do something, well, it's just something you're referring to in the past that you had to do, something that was important, it was necessary. If you're saying I was having to, in that case, I'm trying to think of an example, because often you wouldn't use having in the continuous tense. It depends on the meaning of have. I was having to visit. I have to visit. Well, it may come back to that if I can think of an example. So again, yes, if you guys notice, there is this echo. Haven't been able to shake that just yet. So we're just having to kind of push through with this. But I still want to take some of your questions, like vocabulary. Let's try to stick with vocabulary. If there are any words or phrases that you want me to talk about and discuss, any words or phrases. Somebody asked if I am American or British. I am from the United States. So I try to, sometimes when I talk about idioms, that may be more referencing the United States, but I try to just talk about vocabulary or anything that's pretty well known across many different English varieties. So like, that's a good point. Yingo's asking what's the different practice with a C and practice with an S. I think that'd just be more of a spelling difference between American English, British English. There are many different words that are spelled differently. That would be an example. So Takayo asked, when you say long decades, how long years could it mean? I would also say, well, first of all, a decade is 10 years. I think most people would use, unless there's a specific example, like would talk about like many decades. If they want to refer to a long time, they might say many decades. I'm trying to think of a long decade. I'd have to think of I can't think of a specific example when somebody might use that phrase and refer to a long decade. unless they're trying to say the same way a person might refer to a long year. And in that case, if somebody's talking about, like say 2020, this year has been a long year. And in that case, they're referring to a year is the same amount of time. But if you're referring to it as been a long year, in this case, it means like something that has not been pleasurable. All right, there's some type of problem, and you could say it's been a long year. So I don't know if somebody's referring to long decade, that again, it's something that's not pleasurable. But if you're talking specifically about time, I'd say many, many decades. Let's see. Sleepo says, Wes, why are some adjectives we can see both ways forming, for example, ruder and more rude? Which one is correct? That's a good question when you talk about superlatives and superlatives. The general rule is if you're talking about like a short one-syllable word like rude, then you're going to use the ER. Like, this person is ruder than my boss. So in this case, I would say ruder. You're going to use the ER. There are other examples where I think it's not as easy and straightforward. So for example, if you take the word clever. Let me go over, I'm just going to talk about this and go back to full screen. So if you have the word clever, it's 2 syllables, and it ends with an ER. And some people say, well, is it cleverer or is it more clever? Because you have words like spicy. That also is 2 syllables, but we'd say spicier. So I think in that one, I obviously would use, I typically say more clever, but there are sometimes when words that people, I think speaking informally, will use either one. And I don't think anybody's going to call you out and say, oh, that's incorrect, if you were to say more rude, like this person's more rude than this other one. So I think there are some adjectives in which it may sound a little awkward, but it really depends. But I don't think, for the most part, this is something that people in general, whether you're a native speaker or a learner, people may not follow those specific rules. I'd say definitely try to and learn the rule. But I think when you're having a natural, free-flowing conversation, that's when you hear it. I've caught myself even saying like fun. Fun is one where it's more fun. And I know at one point in the past, I know I've caught myself saying funner just like randomly. And it's like, I catch it later and it's like, oh, okay, I know that was a mistake. But let's see, different between general and academic vocabulary. That's a good question. I think academic vocabulary, I think, is more related to school, like university. So there are certain words that I think people might use when they're in university and they're writing a report or they're giving a presentation. And I think you could refer to those words as academic words. That doesn't mean that they're always advanced. I did a couple of lessons talking about academic vocabulary. And because I use the word academic, I think people automatically think, well, these are very advanced words. And that's not always the case. There is a list out there. It's called the Academic Word List. If you did a Google search for it, you will find that it's a list of the most common academic words in English. So if you just do a Google search, I'll write it in the chat, do a Google search for academic word list in English. And you'll get some Google search results for this list. And it's the most common academic words in English. And that's what my lesson was about. And because the words were common, they're not really that advanced, but they're words that I think are very helpful if you are in an education setting and you're in school or you're in university. So when I think of academic, that's more what I think of. Let's see. So it seems like the echo's maybe gone away. That's good news. Alde says, what about facetious? So facetious is, I'll add that to our vocabulary list. Um, Facetious is another adjective, and what it means, I'm going to write adjective, is someone who is joking and not being serious. And I would often add that they're saying things that are a bit ridiculous. And I'm saying that they're talking about things that are a bit ridiculous because I think that the intention is that the other person knows that they're joking. So that's where it's like you're not really telling a lie because it's like you're trying to say something that is over the top, it's really ridiculous, and the other people know that, okay, they're not being serious, they're being facetious. And I think we often use it in that continuous tense, like somebody is being facetious. Abdurrahman asks, what does ambidextrous mean? That is another great word. I'll add it to the list. So if somebody is ambidextrous, it's another adjective. And it means they have the ability to use both hands. I'm going to say competently. I'd have to look because it's not just talking about your hands. So for example, to give you a clear cut example, people will mostly use either their left hand or their right hand. So for example, I write with my left hand. I'm a southpaw. But if somebody is able to write with their left hand and their right hand, then you could say they are ambidextrous. They can use both equally. So I think we use this adjectives when people are talking about their hands. I don't know if it always has to be about hands, but it means that you can use both equally. You can use that when talking about writing or throwing, anything that you typically do with your hands, because I think one of them is going to be dominant. Like I said, my left hand is my dominant hand. But if somebody's ambidextrous, then they can use both equally. Let's see. Any more? No echo now. Okay, that's good. What does Bran ask? What does rioting mean? So riot can be a verb, to riot, or a noun, a riot. And it's basically when, I'm just going to use it as, we'll say, to riot, verb, I would say is a violent protest against something, all right? So a riot is when the key word is there is violent, or it becomes they're creating problems. So for example, I think probably if you've been following the news about things that have gone on in the United States with George Floyd or Black Lives Matter, there have been a lot of protest and people are speaking out against racial injustice. And at some points, sometimes the protest, when it gets nighttime, and many people will go home, but sometimes those protests, the people that are remaining, it may turn into a riot, and people are damaging property, they are maybe setting things on fire, and that is what I mean by violent, and then you could call it a riot. That's when it becomes a riot. Let's see. But that's a good question because these are words that you will hear if you're watching the news or you're reading about it. This is useful vocabulary, so that's a great question. What else do we have? So I'm glad that the the echo has kind of settled itself out. What does it mean, conspicuous? So if something is conspicuous, it's an adjective and it means that it is easily recognizable. So if something is conspicuous, it's easy to recognize and understand, like, oh, I see it, I understand what it is. And often people may use it with kind of trying to say the opposite, that they don't want to be recognized, and then they're talking about inconspicuous. So again, we can add those to the list. If we're talking about, I think most of the time, conspicuous, not easily recognized. I'm saying inconspicuous because I think this is actually probably more common than conspicuous. But so conspicuous is you're easily recognized, but inconspicuous it's not easily to recognize. And you may, if you're watching a TV show, somebody might say, look, we need to be inconspicuous. We don't want people to recognize us. We need to be inconspicuous. Sarah's asking for synonyms for beautiful. So it really depends. If you're talking about maybe the way somebody looks beautiful, you could say then in that case you could say somebody looks incredible, they look amazing. Perhaps if it's a little more formal, you could say that they look elegant. If you're describing a picture, again, then you could say that the picture is beautiful, or the picture, there's words like astounding, wonderful. So I think all of those are good words to express that you are impressed by something. So it really depends. And there's another lesson that we did talking about synonyms for beautiful. MD Roman asked, what does whimpering mean? So if somebody is whimpering, let's go back over here to the website, because I told you that I like to use Cambridge if I'm looking up a word, and just to show you how easy it is. Like whimper is a verb, to whimper, but you could use it as an adjective and say somebody is whimpering. And I think they give a great meaning, like a series of small weak sounds expressing pain or unhappiness. So that, again, I think Cambridge does a good job of explaining things easily. So let's go back over to our vocabulary list. And if I were to use it and say whimpering, series of small sounds expressing pain or unhappiness. So I think, again, that when somebody's in pain or unhappiness and you hear them making that sound, then you could say that this person is whimpering. Or if it's an animal making that sound, that the animal is whimpering. But this is great vocabulary because, again, I think it allows you to be more specific. When you're able to use these nouns and these adjectives, you can be a little more specific. So let's see. What is the difference between secluded and isolated? So I think sometimes secluded and isolated could be used interchangeably. Secluded makes me think that there's nothing there. So you're just describing the way something looks. Like I could say let's go over to our vocabulary list, because both of those are adjectives. So I'm going to say that if you say like the beach is secluded, so this is an adjective that, well, again, I just want to make sure giving you the best information. So let's see. I would say like secluded is more like it's kind of alone and there's nobody there. It's private. It makes me think something is private. Like if you say the beach is secluded, it's kind of away from the popular beach. It's a little more private. It's a little more alone. But again, let's just go ahead and check and secluded. So, oops, I spelled it wrong. So yeah, they give us very similar answer: quiet, private, and not many people around. So you could refer to, I think, of a beach is secluded. That would be a good example as to how this is used. So if we go back over here to our vocabulary page, so where is it? Secluded. Can you guys see this? Quiet, private, place without many people. Now, if you refer to an area as isolated, again, it's an adjective. I think it is basically away from everything else to the point where I would think of a word as alone. That alone would be, because you could say, a person could say that they feel isolated. Or you could talk about an area, that the area is isolated, and it makes me think it's not very easy to get to. So again, you guys can see, excellent. You can see that. We go back and look at Cambridge. It says the same thing, really not near other places, and you say that this is a very isolated area. So it really depends on what you're trying to describe. If you want to say it's private and there's not many people, it's secluded. If it's really just far away from other places, then you could say it's isolated. But again, it's good to know the difference between some of these adjectives because they have very similar meanings. Let's see. Probably by accident. We have a dichotomy. That's a good word, dichotomy. So that is a noun, and if we're talking about a dichotomy, that was another, I don't know if you guys watching some of these lessons and maybe you see it and maybe weren't following or weren't able to follow clearly the explanation, because they did. I think I put that in one of the lessons I did on nouns. So it's talking about the difference between two opposing ideas. And I want you to see, like, if you're unable to follow that explanation, to try to put it in context, you could say, they give you this example sentence: there's often a dichotomy between what politicians say and what they do. So that's a really good example because those are opposing ideas. Politicians might say one thing, but they do the opposite. And there's a dichotomy between that. Often you're going to follow this noun with that preposition between. There's a dichotomy between two things. Difference between two completely opposite ideas. So if we go over here, let me go back to our vocabulary list and add dichotomy, which is a noun. Difference between two opposing ideas. All right, excellent. So let's see. Do I have any other questions I want to go through quickly? Sorry again about the beginning of all of this when we had that echo and we're having to deal with that. Paul Dorgon asks, are there any synonyms for happy to oblige or you're welcome from American English? Yeah, so instead of saying, I feel obviously the most common would people be saying like, oh, you're welcome if you want to, if somebody thanks you for your help. I think you might say, you could say happy to oblige. I don't think it's as common, but you would also say that if somebody is thanking you for the help you provided. No, I'm happy to oblige, or I'm happy to do something for you. Other things that people could say instead of you're welcome would just be very informal expressions like no problem, don't worry about it, it's all good, would be responses that you could give. But I think in that case, it would be you're more friendly with the person. You know this other individual, and they're thanking you for something. Yeah, no problem. Don't worry about it. It's all good. No worries. And those are ways of kind of saying you're welcome in a different way. So those would be some synonyms that I think are very informal and that I actually would use. I use no worries quite a bit. Like, hey, don't worry about it. No worries. Let's see. Hari asks, what does pursuit mean? So I think people would use it. Pursuit means you're trying to follow and often like really try to catch something. And you would say that you are in pursuit of something. So you might hear the phrase like somebody is in pursuit of happiness. And they are trying to, I think we're all in pursuit of happiness and we're trying to find it, we're trying to catch it. Another phrase people might talk about, the police. The police are in pursuit. They're following a criminal and they're trying to catch this person. They are in pursuit. So you are following and trying to catch and get something. So I think you might hear it talking about like happiness, in pursuit of happiness, or as a job, police would say like, oh, the police are in pursuit. Sigbo says, it's my pleasure. That's another good one. Excellent. Thanks for sharing. Perfect. So let's see. Sunny has ghettoization. I have no idea what this word means. So again, that is when you could go back to, I think maybe they're, oh, I know what you're talking about. Ghettoization. I don't know if that's actually, I guess people would use it. So it refers to the ghetto. And if somebody's talking about the ghetto is an informal word that people would use to describe an area that typically might be in a city that is more impoverished, an area that experiences a lot of poverty and probably has more crime. And informally speaking, people might refer to that as the ghetto, and that would be a noun. So if you're talking about adding some suffixes to that and changing the word, and you could use it as like, oh, the ghettoization of the city, it would refer to the city is increasingly having more areas like that there are more ghettos in the city, if you want to say, oh, the ghettoization of this city. So that's what I think you may hear people use it as if they're adding those. But the base word, that noun, which is talking about a ghetto, which is a noun, is more referring to an impoverished area that might experience a lot of crime. I want to add a couple of those words to the vocabulary list because I did spend some time talking about them. Let's see. So we talked about pursuit. And I think people in pursuit of something would be a common phrase. Trying to catch or get hold of something. And we talked about ghetto, informal noun. I'd say area affected, I'm going to use that word, by poverty and may have more crime. So again, somebody might be using that word in different ways. All right, so I think what I'm going to do, I know I tried to do it a little longer because we were having those problems earlier, and I apologize for that. Apologize if the lesson seemed a little more disjointed because of it. I'm glad to know that that there is no echo right now, so I'm going to see if I can track down really what the issue is so we don't experience this before. It's really frustrating because I keep the same settings on this. So when you have the same settings, but then something changes like that, then it's like, okay, what do I do now? So I hope that you enjoyed the little Q&A. I want to do this from time to time and take questions about vocabulary, pronunciation, anything. If you enjoy these lessons, whether they're vocabulary, grammar, these live lessons, want to show us some love and support our channel, you can check out YouTube membership or Patreon. There are some cool rewards, and there are links down below in the description. And I notice some patrons who are with us today, and thank you guys for joining me. So I appreciate you guys being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And just to give some quick shout outs at the end for those of you who are still here: Sunny, thank you. Abraham, Anas, thank you guys. Yingo, Flamingo, the Potato, excellent, love that name. Thank you guys. Sleepwalker, good to see you again. Hari, military vocabulary. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. All right. Takayo, thank you. Lali, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will be back next time, hopefully without the echo. We're going to keep working on this. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys next time. So long.